I want to talk about an issue I've found in the way a really famous book is written, because I think we writers can learn a valuable lesson from it. The book is Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. But first of all, I'll just make it clear that I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a great story, and for the most part, it's really well told. I wanted to say that first because I think it bears repeating. But actually, that's kind of the problem. Repetition. I spotted quite a few passages throughout the story that just kind of struck me as being oddly worded. I'm talking about repetitions that, as an editor, I would have picked up and changed. But hey, maybe that's just me, and other readers would disagree. You'll have to let me know what you make of these passages in the comments. Let's look at the first passage that stood out for me, and I'll tell you what I'd have done differently to Michael Crichton, if I can be so bold. In my copy, this is page 155, and spoiler alerts, obviously. Tim watched as Grant, Sattler and Malcolm got into the first Land Cruiser with the lawyer, Gennaro. Tim looked at Lex, who was standing pounding a fist into a glove. Tim pointed to the first car and said, "Can I go with them?" So, with me having read that out loud, did you spot what I'm referring to? The repetition that stuck out to me. It's Tim. Tim, Tim, Tim. 3 sentences on the bounce, beginning with the same word. Tim's the POV character for this section, so of course, we're going to refer to him by name. It's going to be a pretty regular occurrence, in fact. And as writers, we often need to make sure that the reader knows which of our characters we're referring to with movements and dialogue and that sort of thing. Especially in situations where there are multiple people in the scene. Like here, where we've got a bunch of characters all standing around those cool stylized jeeps that we all remember from the movie before they head off on their disastrous tour of the island. The temptation is to fix this repetition by just saying he instead of the character's name again, but here we run into another problem. If we did that, if we just changed the he, maybe the one in the middle here, then that might give the impression that Gennaro is the one looking at Lex, and that's not quite right. So instead, my suggestion on how to fix this is a simple one. We're already in Tim's POV. That's established from language like Tim watched and Tim pointed. That means we don't necessarily even need to directly frame what Tim's doing at all with Tim looked. We don't need it. The reader will already know we're looking through his eyes and seeing what he sees to an extent. So why not just have Lex was standing pounding a fist into a glove? Since this follows a list of things people are doing that Tim is watching, it blends right in and it cuts out that repetition of Tim and no meaning's lost. That's what I'd probably do with that passage to keep it simple, because the language of the book is generally straightforward, concise, not at all flowery or lyrical. So I feel like as an editor, that would fit. Imagine yourself as the editor for a sec. Would you do the same thing? What else would you change? And you might want to change everything about this passage and rewrite all of this totally differently. But remember, you're the editor for this moment, not the writer. If your task is to match your author's voice as well as you can, how far do you go when nothing's technically incorrect here grammatically? That's the balance. Let me know what you think. The next thing is something I know I've talked about in at least one other video, but something I see all the time. Bonus points if, when I read this passage, you remember my term for this particular kind of repetition. Normal points if you just spot what it is. I bet you will. Here's the passage. He paused there, listening to the rhythmic flick of the wipers. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He looked back down the road. He'd obviously taken a wrong turn somewhere. He could retrace his steps, but that would take too long. He'd better try and find out where the hell he was. He got out of the Jeep, feeling heavy raindrops spatter his head. So you can probably spot it. This again stands out more prominently when you read it aloud, I think, but it's he. I think the 7 sentences starting with he, back to back. And that term that I use for this is pronoun paralysis. It's where you get stuck opening sentence after sentence with a pronoun over and over again. This usually happens with first person. So you end up with I sentences back to back. But third person isn't safe from this either. In my view, this really should have been picked up in editing. 2 sentences back to back, I think, is okay. 3, I'd firmly suggest making a change. Any more than that is just too much of a pattern for me. There are short sentences in this passage, which I think is intended to keep the pace up. They're quick thoughts. This is the bit, by the way, where Dennis Nedry's racing for the boat to get off the island after stealing the dino DNA. So maybe we're mimicking his problem-solving, quick thought process here. Maybe. But I would definitely string a couple of those sentences together at least, and just otherwise reframe them to mask that use of he. This is my suggestion. Again, remember, we're trying to retain as much of the voice as we can. He paused there, listening to the rhythmic flick of the wipers. Looking back down the road, he took a big breath and exhaled slowly. He'd obviously taken a wrong turn somewhere. Retracing his steps wasn't an option. That would take too long. He better try and figure out where the hell he was. Heavy raindrops spattered his head as he got out of the Jeep. Perfect? No, of course not. We're mixing past and present in a kind of floaty manner there that I don't love, but that is true to the book, really. For a quick fix, yeah, I think this works, and it doesn't sound too different to the original passage. What would you do here? Because I've still got 3 he sentences, plus a sneaky he in the middle of a sentence. Maybe there's other ways to further smooth it out, because to me, that's what this is all about. This is the purpose of changing that repetition. It's not because it's grammatically wrong or inaccurate or it doesn't make sense. It's really fine on all of those counts there, technically. But if we think of a reader's experience, it's just a bit too bumpy. It creates this recognisable rhythm in its pace, like speed bumps, that stops you from looking out the window at the nice view as it rolls by and instead makes you look at the road surface ahead, anticipating the next bump. But not every jolt in the road is as big as a speed bump. Sometimes there are little tremors that can still throw you off a bit too. Let's have a look at some smaller things, rapid fire. The first one here is particularly fitting for this road analogy. He was looking back towards Dr. Grant when a jolting impact rocked the Land Cruiser and shattered the windshield in a spiderweb, and the Tyrannosaur's head crashed against the hood of the Land Cruiser. So I don't really like this sentence for a few reasons. There's too much going on, but my main point here is on Land Cruiser, which is specifically full named twice in the sentence and just sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? I don't think the second mention of it is needed at all. We already know this is all taking place within the car, so I think you could have just said crashed against the hood, and that would have been fine. That's a bit better, I think. This next one's a 2 for 1, with one issue being the same as something we've already seen, which you'll no doubt spot, then another thing that I think doesn't quite sound right either. See if you can spot both. He looked down at his feet. He was standing on the door handle. He crouched back down on his hands and knees to look at the handle. So I know you spotted the pronoun paralysis again with the he, absolutely. But for me, the word handle sticks out here too. I think here the second handle could just have been it, because the object itself had been introduced in the last sentence. To look at the handle just feels a bit specific and bumpy to me when it would have worked just fine. And the same sort of thing happens a bit further on with my final example here. You'll spot this one too, I think, though it does blend in a little better maybe. She ran for the door that led to the stairwell. Behind her, she could hear the raptors shaking the branches of the tree. They were still in the tree. Yeah, it's tree here. It just sounds a bit weird to me to repeat that word so soon after it was just mentioned. I'd be inclined to say they were still climbing it, maybe, or something like they were still scrambling their way to the top. It did occur to me that perhaps we're supposed to read the last sentence there almost like internal monologue for the character. So it could be, behind her, she could hear the raptors shaking the branches of the tree. They're still in the tree. In that case, putting that last bit in italics takes us into the character's mind a bit more firmly, making a visual contrast on the page from the normal narration, which softens the repetition a bit, at least in my opinion. I don't know if that's what's intended, but it's worth considering. Let me know what you'd change on that one as well. But the important thing to remember here is that this is a good book, a really good but imperfect story. So we're not analysing it for the purpose of derision. We're trying to cut away the slightly wonky bits so that the story will be stronger for it. That's the approach I take into all my editing work, to lift and elevate the writer's voice as much as possible. And that's what you should do with your own writing too, if you're self-editing. By the way, I am booked up with full manuscripts up until July now, but I'm still going to be taking 5,000 word extracts regularly, as well as short fiction. So if you want the opening to your book shaped up a bit so you know you're off to a good start, or if you're happy to just wait till July for a full novel edit, reach out on my website. Making errors like pronoun paralysis and these little repetitions doesn't mean the whole story's rubbish and you should throw it all away. Jurassic Park, for example, is really entertaining and fun to read, with some passages about the use of technology that I've never felt more appropriate than they do now. Seriously, look up Ian Malcolm's speech about the power and responsibility of science towards the end of the book. It's eerily fitting for the AI-obsessed world of today. What I'm trying to say is, Don't look at editing and redrafting as this painful process of seeing how terrible you are at writing. Look at it as an act of self-support and a strengthening process for your book. This video was a bit different to what I usually make, so if you liked it, let me know and consider subscribing if you're not already. I hope it was helpful. Thank you so much for watching as always, and happy writing.